So here we are, we're live. So my name is Gunnar Soros, and just getting started with today's Craft Beer Blab. And as always, right to the side of me here is Jonah Di Pasquale, the Hoggle, co-hosting for me, and great guy, another craft beer aficionado. So we'll get started here today. I think I'm not sure what you have in plan for drinking, but I have a couple that I put them on my little thing behind me there. So I have two IPAs, since I figured we'd probably be talking about IPAs, and IPAs are super popular. And so first up is another Surly Brewing offering overrated West Coast style IPA. And it's kind of funny because they came up with the name overrated because they felt that a lot of people were harping on them and all the Surly fanboys and saying, "Oh, you know, Surly, they're overrated. They just come out with IPAs, and that's all they do." So they took it to heart and they just came out with a beer called Overrated. And it's actually kind of funny. I'm not sure if I can find it real fast, but their original. So when you come up with a beer and you're going to sell it as a brewer professionally, you have to go through all kinds of legal loopholes, and one of those is in packaging. You have to have labels authorized, and I can't remember who you have to go through, but you have to have labels authorized by the government. And so what they did was they made a fake label to put out there as kind of a trailer, I guess you could say, for the beer, but kind of poking fun at themselves. And let me see if I can find it real fast. Here we go. And okay. And where's my camera? Okay, so let me pop it onto the screen here, and hopefully I can get it on there correctly.
Mm-hmm.
Boink. There it is. So they have a pink unicorn with rainbows to kind of, and that was just to get the labeling approved, because I guess what they really care about is all the legal stuff on the side. And so at the last minute, they changed it from that pink unicorn to what they're using now, which, let me see if I can pull a copy of that, which is actually a nice label. Oh, that picture has both of them. So,
nice.
So just kind of a funny thing that they're able to poke fun at themselves and just go at it. So Surly Overrated, it's a West Coast style IPA, and I think basically what that means is that they use a lot of West Coast hops and they kind of overhop it, I guess you could say. So it's very aromatic. It's I don't know what the IBUs on it are, but it's not overly bitter. It's just a very hoppy, aromatic beer.
Nice.
Then the second beer that I'll probably be drinking afterwards is it's another Minnesota brewery called Indeed Brewing, and this is a black IPA. And the difference being obviously the color, and how they get the color is that they definitely go through and they add more roasted malts to it. So in the malting process, they kind of like coffee beans. So there's different colors of coffee beans. They roast the malt in it a lot longer, so you get kind of more of a rich chocolatey malt flavor. And then they use those malts, and so it makes it it definitely gives it a more of a malty, roasty flavor to it. So those are my two beers. What do you got for us tonight, Jonah?
All right. Well, my first and only choice, actually, I went with one of my house faves. It is a Ballast Point.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, pretty excited about that.
Yeah.
This one actually was my first introduction to Ballast Point, and this is again, it's called Sculpin. It is it is an IPA. And here's the other interesting point that normally when I have tried this beer, it's been in a bottle.
Mm-hmm.
So there have been some articles floating around. I don't know if you folks have seen me sharing them on my Twitter account. I think I also shared them with Gunnar. But we had talked about this last week, where a good majority of companies are taking the stance to go to canned beer. Gunnar, your point was well taken about the light and also keeping the beer fresh. So yeah, so this is I'm gonna give this a little in my particular chalice here. Let's see
Nice.
what we got there.
Beautiful.
And this has got a really good aroma. I think that if you've never tried Sculpin, they use you had mentioned earlier. There's I think it's like 5 separate stages that they use to produce this beer. I think it's there's hints of apricot, peach, mango, lemon flavors. As I said, which is bizarre.
Right.
You never would really expect that for beer for starters, but this I think it's got I think the IBUs on it is 70, and you're looking at about a 7% alcohol, and they produce this year round, so you definitely can
Mm-hmm.
get your fix of a sculpin, and again, it just has a really good finish to it. I'd say as far as pairing, you could almost I would say you pretty much can. I think for those folks watching this on replay or live, thanks for joining. But this particular IPA, as well as many of the IPAs, I believe they're probably the most user friendly with almost any um, normal fare, meaning any type of traditional American cooking. I think you can get away with, or maybe even your other favorite dishes. But I feel like this is a good go-to. I don't always know, or I don't always believe that it's a good go-to if you're bringing it to a party, because
Mm-hmm.
sometimes not a lot of people like that bite to the beer, and that's why some people, if you do mention IPAs, are kind of like, those are bitter, they're nasty, or I
Right.
don't like them. I think I was of that adage when I first tried IPA. I was like, man, like there's something not right about this beer, but I have to say definitely an acquired taste for sure.
Right.
Meaning that not necessarily like it took me to like it, but I think after like
Okay.
probably after
Mm-hmm.
trying it probably like 2 or 3 times, I was like, yeah, this is it. And then you go back to those lighter lagers and ales, and you're just like, oh man, there's like something missing. So Ballast Point, and again, they've got a huge.
Oh,
Hello, you hear me? Hello, hello.
hello,
Can
hello.
you?
Yeah. I don't know
Okay.
what happened there. That was a
Yep.
little strange.
Yeah. Don't know.
Yeah.
But at any rate, so yeah, Ballast Point, check them out. Their website, it's goodness gracious, ballastpoint.com.
Oh, yeah. I should have looked
And
that up.
yeah, that's all right. Ballastpoint.com. And where are they out of? They are out of Massachusetts, is it? I think it is. No, hold on, could be wrong. Where is Bell's? Well, how about if I just read the can?
Right.
Silly me. Um, no, I'm sorry. They are out of San Diego,
Ah,
California,
yes.
Miramar, and yeah, you can actually visit their store. Come take a tour. Next time I'm in San Diego, I am going to do that.
Oh yeah. Well, and San Diego has a ton of great breweries. I have a friend that's actually in San Diego. I think he's still in San Diego right now. Um, he's visiting, and I think he's going to be visiting a number of breweries. Stone Brewery that we had the one time, Ballast Point, and I actually can't think of the other ones, but I know that there are a number of really good breweries in that area.
Nice.
I'm going to go ahead and pour my beer also. What's really nice about Surly is that most of their beers come in pint cans, which so it's got a
Nice. Yeah.
nice color to it. So like you can kind of see the size difference.
Wow.
Definitely more of a tall boy
Yeah.
than the standard 12-ounce cans, which is great. You feel like you're getting more per can, but I think cost-wise, it comes out to about the same of what you'd get if you get a 6-pack of 12-ounce versus 4 16 ounces. I think it evens out, so it's always good. So let's see here as we get our drink on a little bit. So I don't know. Have you heard the myth of the IPA? How I guess the IPA came. Well, I don't know if it's how it came about, but there's a myth
Um, yeah. I
of
mean, I did during uh, the trade era, they were packing the ships to cross the ocean, and what the brewers initially did was to deliberately brew the beer so that it was able to
okay,
last the journey across the Atlantic Ocean. So, in my understanding of that, therefore, because back in the day there was no refrigeration on the ships, that is where the India Pale Ale was born from. Now that's my take on it,
right.
with what research that I've done, and
Well, that's the common story, and I guess there's parts of it that are kind of true, but parts of it that are not. I mean, there was a lot of trade back and forth with England and India at that time in the 1700s, but the India Pale Ale wasn't necessarily made to survive the voyage across or through the sea. Um, the most popular beer at that time, and this is all internet knowledge, I guess you could say. But the most popular beer at that time that I heard of through my resources was the porter, English porter, and that survived just fine. And generally porters are not very hoppy; they're a little more darker and more malty.
right,
Um, and they survived the travel across the ocean just fine. Sometimes I think it would take like a year to 2 years for things to travel from England to India. Um, and so they didn't necessarily make the IPA to travel safely,
right,
um, so to say. So that is kind of it's a great story, and I think it's a great way to kind of
right.
get people interested in a beer. You have something with a certain history, and people get interested in it. Unfortunately, I think from everything that I've read, even though it's super popular, it's just not a true story. Another story is that there were British troops that missed home, and they made the beer specifically for them. That's another myth also. I think it was just a beer that from what I think I've heard, and I could be way off to also, is that just this guy that did trades came up with a beer recipe that was a little hoppier than what was currently in style.
Right.
And because he did trade with India, people kind of came to him and perpetuated this myth, or this that it was this style that was made to go across the seas to India. And I guess that just wasn't the case. But again, it's a great story, and it's a great way to kind of talk about a beer and get more people interested. It's kind of like Guinness has a great story behind their beers. They have a special water, and so it makes it taste better when you have something to really kind of relate to.
Right. It says here, it jumped on good old wiki. It says the
Mm-hmm.
term pale ale originally denoted an ale that had been brewed from a pale malt.
Mm-hmm.
Pale ales in the century were lightly hopped and quite different from today's pale ales. However, by the mid 18th century, pale ales was mostly brewed with coke-fired malt, which produced less smoky roasting of barley in the malting process, and hence a paler beer. One such variety of beer was October beer. It says a pale, well-hopped brew popular among the landed classes who brewed it domestically. Once brewed, it was intended to cellar for 2 years. Interesting. Did not know that. So yeah, that's funny. But I tell you, it's always ironic when you do start actually talking about something like this that is very commonplace. Again, big IPA fan, and taking with me to heart that particular story. I'm not really going to say the manufacturer's label that I read that off of, so clearly it might not necessarily be just me.
No, yeah.
But no, I think that is a valuable bit of information to throw out there, because I would say like most of the beers that we've been trying here on Craft Beer Chat over the past couple of weeks, each beer definitely brings to the table a different flavor, a different type of composition. So the end result is it is a different tasting beer. And I don't necessarily, as far as the region, it seemed like I think another point that you're going towards is kind of that export mentality that it was being shipped to India.
Right.
And it's interesting. So here's and how about this? This is for maybe you or the audience. What if this was an export, then what was the beer that was being consumed in India called?
Right. Yeah.
He's like, if we're shipping an export to India called India Pale Ale, was it just in India just a pale ale? So I think that
right. Yeah.
I'm just sitting saying this and I'm thinking about it. I'm like, well, that's kind of odd.
Right.
What is the answer, right? You just got to kind of figure out that doesn't make any sense. So it says the term IPA commonly used in the UK for low gravity beers. It says with alcohol volume of 4% or lower. First brewed when taxes on beer ingredients and greatly increased brewers responding by lowering the strength of the beers. That was in the UK.
Right. Yeah. I heard that too. What is it? So some beers were actually, they would make it a lot weaker, and then people learn to drink them that week, and then when they bring it back up to normal, or not normal, but to higher ABVs, then that's where things kind of some people don't like it, because it's when you add alcohol, you got to add more hop flavor and more malt flavor, and you get more flavorful, and some people don't like that.
Yeah, no, and I think a lot of that too is, that goes back to what we were talking about earlier, where I believe that it's a lot to do with your, probably your palate. I would say, some people like sweet things, some people like sour things, some people
Right.
like hot things, spicy, whatever. And let's change gears and talk about wine. Some people like,
Hmm.
um, you know, my wife loves the whites, loves the fruit bouquets and this and that. I just can't stand those kinds of wines where I'm on more of the red, the bolds, the cabs, like just something that really like punches you in the face when you're drinking it. Not exactly,
Hmm.
but I think with craft beer, to our audience, I think that if we're taking IPA for example, and if you're watching this on replay, thank you. Craft beer chat every Tuesday at 9:01 p.m., 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Gunnar Saros and Joe DePasquale with you. We're talking about IPAs, and as I said earlier, with IPAs, my original palate was that I didn't like the beer.
Hmm.
The IBUs, which Gunnar had talked about, that is essentially the way that it is developed is the higher that number is, essentially the more of the percentage of the actual hop that is in that beer. And imagine, if you will, if we're talking about cooking, imagine that being a jalapeno, and how much of the jalapeno you're putting into your meal. It's going to be more spicy. And obviously, when we're talking IPAs, the beer is not spicy, but it does have a. I don't know what would be the best way to describe that. I mean, again, I don't think bitter is the way to describe it, but maybe that might be the way folks that are trying IPAs for the first time may gather that to be.
Right, right. Well, and the tricky part too is that besides the bitterness, because so hops are kind of, I think they're a flower. So hops, what they use to brew it, to make it hoppy, or to make it to give that IBUs, they use these hops that are these little. They look like little pine cones, but they're small, green, and they have this compound in it. I can't think of what the compound is. I want to say lupulin, but it gives the beer its bitterness, and also um, a lot of flavor and aroma. And so certain certain hops have more of the compound that makes bitterness. Certain hops give more aroma. Certain hops give more flavor. And so, depending on the hops that the brewer uses, uh, they can kind of adjust all that, in addition to when they add it to their beer. So by just having a measurement of IBU, it's a good start. So IBU of 100 is probably going to be a pretty bitter beer, and I guess bitter. Uh, and Starley says, I took a Cicerone class. They do use IBUs as an indication for the hoppiness expressed in the beer. Yeah, exactly. And they do. It's a way to measure it, and it's one of those things. It's like, okay, well, it has to be measured in its effect. So if a beer says 99 IBUs, then it'll have 99 IBUs in it, and it'll have a certain level of bitterness. But then it can be balanced by the malt, and even, like, you can use brewer's sugars or Belgian sugars, uh, and different compounds to offset that bitterness. And then if you're using a lot of floral hops, then you get more flavor or more aroma to it. So it gets a little complicated. So I think the bitterness can be offensive to some people, but then some of the flavors, if you haven't developed a palate for it, some of the IPAs are very piney, or they have kind of an almost resin taste to it. Kind of like, I mean, imagine taking a bunch of um, pine needles and rubbing them in your hand and smelling that, and you get that aroma. And uh, Luke is saying, yes, that's it, offensive. And so some people will find it offensive. And so when it's overly hoppy and you haven't developed a taste for it, and it's especially the piney and the resinous
Right.
taste to it, and some hops have more of they call it dank. It's almost kind of like a wet, dank flavor to it and smell to it. That can be kind of offensive to some people. So it does become tricky. Although a lot of the newer IPAs, or maybe not newer, but a lot of the more popular IPAs, Luke says Keith's had a green label hoppy beer. Ick. Yeah, some people don't like hoppy beers, and you know what? That's fine. There's all sorts of different types of beers out there, stouts, porters, uh, whatnot. And so if IPAs aren't your thing, then by all means, drink what you enjoy. I mean, that's what it comes down to. So, and it did take me a while to kind of learn to appreciate IPAs also. Um, and there are some that I still, I'll take a sip and I'll be like, whoa, that's a
Yeah.
little too much, and
Yeah.
have to
If
put it
I
down.
yeah if I could jump in there,
Hmm.
that that's one of the other beers kind of moving the slider the other way. A beer that I had a food pairing quite a while ago, which was a bit much, was a smoked porter.
Okay.
And I don't know if you've tried. There's a couple out there. It's pretty much like drinking smoke. It's
Hmm.
bizarre. Like it has a very like literally smoky taste. Like I don't know any other way to taste it. Like oak, very very rich oak undertones and finish, and it's again depending on what you're drinking it with, or what the purpose is. You can probably consume a beer or two. I found it to be way too much. So again, would that be something that I would drink again? No. One of the things, if you guys were tuning in, and if you have a chance to watch some of the earlier shows on replay, we were talking um, with our folks from Barrel Backers, and I think, and we mentioned a little bit maybe with Hobby Trolley, but the bitters and some of the newer uh, beer. Well, I don't want to say beers, but where that the direction of brewing is going. And it's funny because I had taken the Untapped app off of my phone, but I was
Hmm.
playing around with it, and I see that a good number of my friends and colleagues that I'm kind of following on Untapped are starting to kind of get into that into like the cherry tarts and things like that. And again, I to what exactly we're talking about here. I mean, that's something that I just haven't been able to grasp my head around, saying, well, am I going to enjoy this? And I think to the
Right.
people watching right now about IPAs, just as I think I'm probably going to give these cherry tarts or sours a chance to see whether or not I like them. And I think, the whole purpose of the show, really is to say, well, sure, Gunnar has a preference and I have a preference, and so does Luke, and I think that we just throw that out there as like a, hey, let's talk about this particular style of beer, but are we advocating and saying, well, this is the only beer out there? Not necessarily. Gunnar, you had mentioned Guinness, and I know
Hmm.
coffee folks have been paying particular attention to the latest craze of social media fodder. Well, they're foregoing a process where they use fish bladders to. It's one of the stages at which the Guinness is prepared, and
Mm.
I wouldn't know that because I love Guinness and I drink Guinness no matter what. But if you're a vegan,
Right.
Apparently, that's something that people that are vegans are very hypersensitive about. So I believe come December, maybe, they're now going to make Guinness available, that it does not forgo that particular process of brewing.
Huh.
Yeah, I mean, and again, that's, if you guys want to check that out, it's just, you can just go to Guinness.com and yeah. There was Luke was asking the question. It's
Yeah. Fish bladder free.
it's a process in which they I don't know exactly the process of where exactly the stage of the brewing it is. But as I said, the last couple articles that I've skimmed through, they mentioned that the fish bladder phase of brewing, or wherever they're using it as an additive or something, they're foregoing not doing that. So by not doing that, the people that are vegan are much more happier. So, and again, I think we can pull up that article and just kind of put it down here in the box for people to check that out. But as I said, it just getting back to my point, there's just there's a lot of beer out there. I think this is great because I think it helps us kind of talk through it. Like, for example, one more beer that I had was Nitro Milk Stout, and good lord,
Oh.
it was. I mean, it was great, but it was a
Mm-hmm.
very, very dark, heavy, like heavy, creamy beer, which is crazy. It was good, but again, do you drink a lot of those? No way. I mean, if I had two, that was way too many. So.
Right.
Nice. Luke says the fish
Before there
drank the
could be a
beer and
nation,
its
there had
reclaimed
to be people.
state bladdered out.
Right.
Nice.
That's funny. Um, well, I was gonna say, okay, so I haven't had a whole lot. You were talking about sours a little while ago, so I pulled up. I had a sour probably about a month and a half ago that I actually liked, um, and so I thought, well, I got to pull that up on my Untapped app, and so it's actually there's I guess Illinois brewery called Destil, Desthil brewery, and they make a series of sour beers, and the one that I had was called Wild Sour Here Ghosts Nothing, and it was actually a really good beer. um it was kind of a, I don't, to me, I want to say it was like a Sour Patch Kid, but without a distinct fruit flavor behind it.
Okay.
So it had a sourness to it, but it also had kind of a little bit of a sweetness to it, and
Right.
it wasn't like a Belgian sour or something where all it is sour. So it had a nice flavor to it, and so I don't know. I don't think I can even find that here in Minnesota. I was in Illinois at the time, and we had gotten it, and it was like, oh wow, this may be my gateway sour beer. So that just when you were talking about sours, that kind of jogged my memory there for a second.
So let me ask you this: so how many, if you and I were sitting at the table, how many of those could you drink in like a sitting? Like, not necessarily if you're trying to get like completely cross-eyed, but I mean, like, I will say to you, I'll use ciders.
Mhm.
I don't mind them. I feel like they're good to the palate. Clearly not an IPA, but I just think there's something about it that I just probably could not drink that many cider beers. I mean, just
Right.
you get old ciders and whatever. I mean, what about the sours? I mean, would you say like one or two?
I would probably say two I could easily handle, and I guess it would depend if I was eating something and it was like paired with it well, and I don't even know what you would eat with it. But if it was paired with something
Yeah.
well, I could probably drink more, but probably two, and then I'd probably want to move on to something else. I am a fan of IPAs, so I would probably, okay, well, where's an IPA? Let me get that in. But again, it was an interesting uh, it was an interesting beer that I thought, oh well, that was actually a sour that I like because
Right.
some of the other sours, I don't know what it was about them because I guess it's been a while because you taste something and you're like, oh well, I don't like that, and so you
Right.
generally don't go back to it very often, and so I can't think of what it was about them that I found kind of, I mean, I guess offensive for lack of better term, uh, that I didn't like. Yeah, I'm not sure.
Well, I tell you what,
Oh,
I think we should probably dedicate an entire show to sours here, folks. Craft
right.
Beer Lab
And
Tuesdays
Kristen
and
says in the comments, Kristen says, I'm in love with sours. So, that,
well, we need to hear from you because I clearly can tell you I know nothing about it. So jump
right.
in. There's a seat available, but according to craftbeer.com, sour power, the wild side of pairings. They have beers, sours, Pacific sours, Atlantic Northeast sours, good lord, South sours, West sours, Midwest sours. I can't even keep up with this. Let me see. In fact, in your neck of the woods, Gunner, let me
Hmm.
see. The closest I can see, there's a company out of Wisconsin, Exodus, Central Waters Brewing Company.
Oh, okay.
They're in your neighborhood. But listen to this. How about a Wisconsin Belgian red raspberry tart called Serendipity or Berliner Weiss Old English Porter? Now that sounds good.
Hmm.
Um, I definitely am going to put that on my list of things to do some research on. There's a particular skill that goes. Yes, there's a
Yes. Yeah,
that's
I
very
totally agree with that, Kristen.
yes.
So she's saying, yeah, there's a particular skill that goes with making sours. The environmental conditions have to be right to be able to make them. In addition to that, the uh, the the wild yeast and some of them use a bacteria also in them. And right, exactly what you said. It can contaminate other beer styles. So if you're not meticulous about cleaning after you brew a batch of sours, then you could contaminate future beers with the bacteria and or yeast, and you'll just get bad beer, basically. Um, so that is totally true, and I do agree with that. There's a skill to it, and there's um, I as a home brewer, I wouldn't want to do a sour because I don't want to risk my kit getting any sort of bacteria. When you're using buckets, or basically buckets
Right.
that you ferment in, they're not necessarily, I mean, you can clean them and sanitize them, but sometimes if they're plastic, if there's little scratches in there and the bacteria can hide in that, uh, then you could contaminate beers many times down the line and have to replace equipment. So personally, I wouldn't necessarily get equipment to do sours unless I just used it for sours. And I'm sure that there's some smaller breweries that would kind of have to be, yeah. She said you would have to be specific, um, and so I think especially for the really small, the nano breweries, the ones that are producing on such a small scale, they would almost have to have separate equipment to be able to do sours, or they just specialize in sours.
Well, yeah, and I think that when we were talking with the folks from Barrel Backers, I think
Hmm.
they stated exactly that. To the effect of being able to run batches of sours and do it the right way. Also, too, and I don't know if we had mentioned that, but I think the fermentation period is 1 year, and that's that's like a huge crapshoot to be tying up you know fairly
Right.
substantial
No,
brewing
yeah,
equipment.
yeah.
I mean, you're talking about home brewing kits. That's not that much money of an investment, but when you've got like major fermentation hoppers and brewing equipment just sitting there idle, for a year. Imagine being these nano breweries and only having a small, handful pieces of equipment to do this, and you're like, okay, well, we're just gonna sit on our hands and hope that this comes out good.
Right, right, right. Yeah.
I mean,
It
I
it would definitely be kind of a well, I mean, I guess almost any business is kind of a gamble, but to be able to put time and effort into something and then have it wait for such a long period of time before even packaging it and sending it out and then waiting for it to come back to you to know, okay, well, do people appreciate it? Was it a good batch or, so yeah, I definitely give props to the brewers that are doing. She says that's the magic of craft beer community. Those are brewers that love the challenge, that they try it, and oftentimes magic happens. Yes, yeah,
yeah.
that's so true. I mean, sometimes maybe it is the smaller breweries that are willing to take those chances and say, we'll sit on this for a year. We'll have, we'll put this equipment in and just we'll wait on it.
Right.
And maybe it's the hobby brewers too, because there's a lot of hobby brewers that turn pro, or I guess semi-pro, that they brew part-time, and they come up with something that is great, and hats off to them. Amazing stuff coming out.
And also too, I think when we were discussing earlier with the folks at Hoppy Trolley, it seems like the micro beer craze has definitely taken off, and I thought about this earlier today. It's like, man, even here in Rochester, New York. I mean, there are such a big number of like breweries that are coming up. And now I think that, to your point, as I said, I mentioned in particular here in upstate New York and Rochester, the cider business is really coming on strong. And I'm not a big fan of it. It has caught my attention, but I think that, like the point that we were talking about earlier is with the sours. I mean, it is something that is relatively new, and I think it's going to be a lot easier to capture that audience. However, I do feel like, because of the nature, it's going to be one of those things where, it is, from a palate perspective, it's like, I don't think you're just going to run out and get sours and be like, oh, I've got to have it. I'm sure the first couple sours I have, I'm going to be like, get me the F out of here. But, I just know. I mean, I guess my point is I can tolerate bitter, and I think I want to get to a point you were talking about earlier. With the IBUs, I think I can go back to the very first beer that I tasted that just, was a complete lead pipe to the face, was Red Hook. I had like a Red Hook, and I was just like, wow. Like, I heard all these people talking about Red Hook, and I tried it, and I like literally thought it was disgusting because it was just so pungent. It was
Hmm.
so hoppy. I was like, oh, this is just way too much. So, nice.
Right. So Kristen says it's not all about the profit, though it's a consideration. If their region and community would have an appreciation for it, they take the risk. Collaborations are good for approaching with newer styles, and that's definitely true. Um, she's from Chicago, Illinois. Lots of community and market resources. Back to IPAs, I'm not far from Three Floyds, where people commonly flock for that specific style. Yes. No. Uh, Definitely Three Floyds, definitely known for Zombie Dust, which I actually have not had, but I've brewed a clone of that recipe, um, and thought it was amazing. I would love to get my hands on a bottle of Zombie Dust to taste. Of course, I don't have any of my own left to kind of compare side by side, but would love to be able to taste their beer. Um, and then also wanted to, while we kind of talked a little bit about Hoppy Trolley and Barrel Backers, just wanted to give a shout out to each of them. If anyone out there on the replay or watching live want to check out Hoppy Trolley up in the Twin Cities, Minneapolis, St. Paul area, they have a bus that they do tours of the many Minneapolis breweries up there, and so it kind of takes the driving out of your time up there. So if you want to hit 4 breweries in a day, they can arrange it, and they can take care of getting you to and from all those breweries. And then Barrel Backers, a great new service that's come up that allows you to kind of there's 2 sides to it. There's the beer club side to it, which you sign up, you get I think it was a 12-pack of beer every month.
Yep.
Or what's really cool is that they're promoting this other side of it where they are looking into getting rare beers into the hands of people that want it, and how they decide on what beers to choose is for people go onto their website and you vote for beers, or you can nominate a beer that you think should be up there, and then go ahead and vote for beers that you would want. And if it reaches above a certain threshold, they will contact the brewery and try to purchase the beers and have it available for people to buy through their website. It is a little more expensive than just going to your liquor store, but if you compare that with maybe traveling to, let's say, California to get a bottle of Pliny the Elder, it's going to be a lot less than that. Or, if you want, what is the other one? Heady Topper. Instead of traveling to Vermont to get it, if you're from out of state, like I am, I'm going to contact Barrel Backers and see, hopefully they have enough people and Barrel Backers wants to work with them. They can get it. They'll bring it in and send it out. So it's a great service, and hopefully they have a lot of people going to them to get these rare beers that maybe you can't find in your market.
Yeah, and so far, if I'm looking on the site correctly, it looks like the top beer being voted on is Maple Mistress Imperial Ale. Pliny the Elder is in second, and Heady Topper is in third, with
Mm-hmm.
Jai Ali IPA. And there's a number of the Zombie Dust is on there as
Mm-hmm.
well. So there's definitely a good assortment of beers, and they're great. I mean, I think that they've figured it out with trying to not so much become the middleman, but I think the big thing there is that it just allows people to get access to beers that they just can't find. I mean, like I mean, I would love to try some of the beers, that are available in Rochester, Minnesota, but I mean, I just simply can't find them. You
Right.
know what I mean?
Right.
So that makes it harder for me to be able to enjoy the same experience. Where if you have people like Barrel Backers that are just like, hey, we will ship them to you. It's got to be in a 12-pack, and but wait a minute, they don't necessarily just do 12 packs as well. Don't they do magnums and stuff like that? I think they
Right. I
do.
think that depending on, some breweries will sell just magnums or bombers, and so they have to kind of finagle it. And I think the reason why they do 12 packs or like multiple bombers, and again, you can check out if you check out our replays. I think it was last week that we actually spoke to Barrel Backers. But I think what the deal was for shipping costs, there's a certain magic weight limit that if they get right up to that limit and don't go over, then that shipping cost is right at that magic point. So, obviously if you just get a 6-pack of beer and it costs $45 to ship, you're going to be pretty ticked off. Whereas maybe a 12-pack of beer for $45 is going to be a lot more palatable to your budget. So And same with bombers. If you just get one bomber and it's $50, then you're going to be ticked off. But if you get three or four, um, then you're much happier. So they have some sort of weight specification, and I can't remember what it was and what that cost threshold was. But they kind of have that figured out, and I think he said usually their shipments average about $45. Hopefully my memory is correct, but and then just to go back a second, so just finished my beer. First one, Surly, overrated. West Coast IPA, excellent beer. Nice and hoppy, but not overly bitter. I don't even know what the IBUs is specified on here. They don't have it listed on here. I'm sure it's on the website. But I'm gonna crack open my second one here, which is Indeed Midnight Rider. It's a black IPA, so they use roasted malts in brewing it. Indeed is another Minnesota brewery from up in Minneapolis, and actually I did visit their brewery on a hoppy trolley tour. So in the pour, it pours a lot like, a stout or a porter or a darker beer. But the IBUs are going to be more like an IPA. I mean, IBUs and ABV are going to be lower. Um, got kind of a bit ahead on there, four fingers. But so you can, if you had one, you would be able to smell the kind of roasty, malty aroma coming off of it right away. That's a good beer. Again, 16-ounce pint can versus 12-ounce. So you got a tall boy versus standard can. Kristen says they need to invent smell-o-vision for these blabs. Yeah, definitely, for sure. It would be awesome. You know what? And I think we did it for our first blab where we both tasted the same beer. We got to collaborate again and maybe do something else similar to that. Get the same beer and actually kind of compare notes on what we're tasting.
Well, I think we've been teasing to get barrel backers in on the show once again and get us all on the same page.
Yeah,
And I think that would be good. I know another real big help to our audience watching on replay right now would be just a little bit of a further a forward schedule of what we're trying to work
right.
on, and we owe that to you, the audience, as I said, so you can have a little better handle. Because I think that's part of the experience. If we're talking about IPAs, it'd be good for the people watching maybe to have their favorite IPA. That would be awesome to conduct tasting profiles on these sessions. My logical mind would love the reason to drink more beer. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, and it's I think the nice thing about it is it's just a great way to get out there and have a dialogue with fellow beer lovers, and even like myself. I mean, I do have a passion for craft beer. I find like I do go out of my way to buy good beer. I mean, obviously, it comes at somewhat of a premium, like
Right.
Red Ice or whatever. But I feel like it's the same way with coffee. I mean, you can go to you can get a $10 pound bag of Dunkin' Donuts coffee, but is it good as Jamaican Blue Mountain? Well, of course not. You're talking about
Right.
two completely different spectrums of beans, and I think beer is very much like that.
Hmm.
And I would agree with some of the earlier comments about how a lot of these microbrews and nano breweries are taking the time to really put love and passion into their products. Because I mean, I was thinking about this the other day. I was like, oh well, if you think about it, what sells a craft beer? Oh, is it the fancy, 6-pack sleeve, or the cheeky website, or the Instagram, feed. I think it really boils down to the beer. I mean, you could have the best
Right.
ad campaign and packaging, and if your beer sucks, it sucks. I mean, a
Right.
consumer is going to spend $13 for a six pack and feel like they're drinking 10W40. You're screwed, and especially with social media, I mean, they're going to put you to the cross. So,
Right.
I think it goes without saying.
So Kristen says, I have a sensitive palate and learned that I need to drink more and grow my palate to better indicate the characteristics, other than generally funky beer, which is the easiest thing to identify. Right. Well, and I think that's almost a part of what we're trying to achieve with the Blab. I mean, not just that, but in general of doing a Blab show on beer is that, and I'll admit myself, when I go to the liquor store and I pick out a beer, a lot of times I will pick out something that I've had before that I know that I like, whether it's a Surly Overrated that I've had, numerous times, or, even some of the better known Lagunitas IPA. I'll say, I've had that. I enjoy it. I'll drink that. But to kind of expand a little bit more, I think is one of the reasons why at least I want to do this Blab is to kind of develop a better palate, or maybe not better, but develop an expanded palate to be able to say, okay, well, you know what? I've tried this beer, I've tried that beer, and not just say, oh, okay, I like it, but to actually kind of get across why, you know, maybe it's you know, like I said, I had that sour from and actually I can put the link of the sour series that I tried. So it was by Distill, um, and it was their Ghosts, which was Here Ghosts Nothing, uh, and I was like, oh well, here's a sour that I like. But you know what? It was so long ago that I couldn't say exactly why I liked it, other than maybe it just wasn't overly funky. Um, Maybe it didn't have as much, whatever the bacteria is, the Brettanomyces or whatever it is. But it was good. Maybe it's a good starting point. And it's like other things with beer, where you know people knock on like Blue Moon, and I say, you know what, if that gets someone into trying a craft beer or trying something that has a little more flavor than their standard Coors Light, then let them try a Blue Moon, whatever.
Well, and I think that to be fair, you know, you really have to cite a lot of the, I don't want to say local swill holes, but I mean a lot of the mainstream, bars and pubs and whatnot. I mean, you had mentioned it a while back about like quote unquote selling out, and
Mm-hmm.
let's be honest, for our audience watching this on replay or tuning in right now is, you know, a lot of these beers in some cases they're not mainstream. I feel like a good majority of the beers that I generally try to regularly consume, I'm not always gonna find in my favorite restaurant, pub, or bar. However, that is possible. And please don't take it like just because they are available in your local bar, restaurant, or pub that they have sold out. I guess what I'm saying is that, you'd mentioned, the standard fare, Bud Light, Coors, Yingling, whatever, Sam Adams. I mean, those are their beers. Let's leave it in their
Right.
own category. Would I choose to consume those beers? Absolutely not. I guess to your point is what I see some, you know, establishments doing is trying to bring in the micro craft stuff in small batches in bottles and cans, which I do agree with. They're trying to see what's going to sell before they really make a commitment. And I think it's good and bad. I mean, it's good in that at least they're trying, but I mean, it's bad in that if I walk into a beer and I see a tap of, let's say, Sculpin, from Dallas Beer,
Right.
like I know that place of established is committed because they have a tap there.
Right.
Or if I see, Sculpin in cans, well, I can get Sculpin in cans anywhere. And let's get back
Right.
to the point of why we're, why everybody's tuning in. And by the way, audience, thank you for joining us. Craft Beer chat every Tuesday, 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Jonah DePasquale and Gunnar Soros with you. Also, hey, the long shot customer tune in goes to Kristen Franks. Kristen, thank you so much for hanging in there. And Kristen, thank you for your comments and feedback. And please, we do have an open seat. Jump right in. You're welcome to bring your questions. It certainly seems like you got a number of comments. It says, when I was mad at beer, when I
At
was
a
mad,
beer snob
well,
friend,
yeah,
I would order a Blue Moon, which is great. I think it's so funny because, yeah, and hopefully we don't fall into the category of beer snobs. Although, sometimes I feel that way when I go into the store and I'm spending 20 minutes trying to buy something. It's like, oh my gosh, why does it take so long to pick something to drink? But and one thing I wanted to, you were just talking about Sam Adams, and you were drinking a Ballast Point, and something just popped in my head that Sam Adams has a grapefruit Rebel IPA, and
yep,
Ballast Point has a grapefruit Sculpin IPA,
yep.
and that maybe for next week we should. I know that we can get Sam Adams and Ballast Point where I live, and if you can get both of those where you live, and
Yep.
Kristen, if you want to join in on this, uh, maybe get one of each or a 6-pack of each. Maybe that's quite a buy-in, but get one of each, and we do not only a collaborative beer tasting, but a collaborative versus beer tasting where we say, okay, well, here's Sam Adams, and it's not to say that Sam Adams isn't a craft beer, because I think they still technically are a craft beer, um, although they're kind of pushing that. I don't know if there's even a legal term anymore, but they're kind of they're so big. Um, but versus a Ballast Point, much smaller brewery that is definitely making a name for themselves and is widely distributed. Um, both of their grapefruit IPAs side by side, and we just kind of 2 men enter, 1 man leaves, Thunderdome style.
Yeah, I mean,
What do you think?
I, I think it's a great idea. In fact, Rebel has been one of those beers that I do want to try. I will tell you, I've had grapefruit sculpin, and it is fantastic. It definitely is a beer that is surprisingly very tasty. It's refreshing, and I probably would have no problem drinking more than I need to. But again, just very, very good beer. I think all around, you can. It's pretty good pairing with most foods. I don't. I mean, I didn't really find the grapefruit.
Right.
If you want to, maybe revamp that. Beer chat for next week about that. I would. I definitely would be interested in giving it a shot. As well. So no, that's a great idea.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'd say definitely let's do it. I'll check my liquor stores this weekend and see if I can pick up at least maybe a 6-pack for now. And Kristen says checking Binny's now. Nice. Awesome. So hopefully I think that'll be kind of an interesting thing. Not only will we get each person's perspective of not just one but two of the same beers, and then kind of compare them side by side and see what differences are there. Are they both, maybe they're both amazing and awesome, or maybe one will win out and be like, okay, I'm on top of the others.
Right, right. Yeah, no, I think that's well. Then, and then I think that's as I said, it was always one of the nicer aspects of our show. As I said, we encourage our viewers to join in. Again, if you're watching this on replay, thank you. Craft Beer Chat every Tuesday. No, it's only Tuesday, but hey, might as well be the weekend up here.
Yep.
And I think that as I would agree with yourself, Gunnar, it has certainly pushed me to go a little bit more broader
Hmm.
on my palate. And I also want to kind of back up to what you were saying earlier about even though you have the prowess and the interest of being a craft beer person, I will admit I'm in that same frame of mind where it's like you get almost kind of deer in the headlights when you do go into your local beer shop because you're
Yeah.
just like, I mean, it is. I think two things come to mind. I get overwhelmed at all the choices, and I think that all of a sudden, I think what happens is my palate, my slide rule palate, kind of moves all over the place. I'm like, oh wait, I want a porter. Oh wait, I want a stout. Oh wait, I want an IPA. Oh wait, and it's funny because you you go through your mind and you see each style of beer and you think about, all right, what did I do the last time where I drank that beer and I had a really good time, or this or that or whatever. And a lot of times I think I agree with you 100%. You've got that like default setting. You're like, okay, I know that no matter what, Sculpin IPA is good. I know that no matter what, um, you know what I mean. There's just a good
Right.
number of like go-to beers um, in that craft beer realm that are like you can you can drink them over and over again. However, that doesn't necessarily help you to broaden your taste and appreciation for the many custom craft beers that are out there. So that's why I think, to your
Right.
point, I think it's good that we have many local micro brews popping up and nano brews popping up, because it forces us to try different things. As I was saying earlier to the folks maybe just watching now or watching the show about the ciders. I mean, ciders here in upstate New York are just blowing up, and
Right.
I can't stand them. I just can't stand them. But I will have to tell you that I am definitely beginning to acquire a taste, because the first time I tried them, and and by the way, I think it goes back to your original point, with that, the first time you had beer default setting, like back in the day, and like I remember sneaking my first bottle of like woodchuck cider. It was disgusting. You know what I mean? And having not really even had an appreciation for beer, and then trying woodchuck cider, I was like, oh my god, this is disgusting.
Right.
So let's fast forward 15, 20 years. I mean, obviously the technology and the brewing, and my palate is developed to the point where, like, if I have a cider, I'm like, oh, okay, this isn't bad. I get it. I
Right.
just very much. I mean, the Blue Moon conversation was spot on. I totally agree with
Right. Right.
that.
Yeah.
Or shock top, whatever.
Right. Well, and it's all, I mean, palates are developed over time too, and that's another thing. So I mean, like I have friends that they're diehard, you know, Coors Light and Miller Light drinkers, that when I first would give them a craft beer or a homebrew beer, they were literally like, I mean, they would sip it so cautiously, and it would take them forever to finish a 12-ounce bottle of beer. It was like, oh, what's wrong? You don't like it? And as a home brewer, if you give them a home brew, it's like, oh, oh my gosh, that was one of my hard worked on beers. You kind of got to let it go, because it's like, well, they don't necessarily have a palate for it. So sometimes you'll get a beer that you may not enjoy the first time, and then you try it again, and maybe your palate's developed a little bit because you've tried some other things and you've tasted things, and all of a sudden it's like, wow, this is really good. And it's kind of like the I think probably the first IPA that I enjoyed, and it's more of a English style of IPA, was Summit's original IPA. Summit is another Twin Cities brewery that they distribute kind of regionally. So I mean, they go outside of the state, kind of they're all over the Midwest, but they are based in Minneapolis, St. Paul. But they had an IPA a couple of years ago that they've since renamed, I think, True Brit, and so it's more of a British IPA. So it's not as hoppy as a newer West Coast IPA, although it is fairly bitter, and it's got a nice malt backbone to it, but it's not necessarily as hoppy as some of the newer IPAs. So I remember trying that after trying, something like maybe Sierra Nevada Hoptum, where it was like, whoa, hit you in the face with piney, resiny flavor. And I was like, oh, how can anyone drink this stuff? And then I tried this
Right.
True Brit, and I was like, whoa, this is nice. I could really drink more of this. I drank more of that, and then it kind of opened me up to more IPAs. And of course, everybody drinks IPAs now. Um, and you could find one from almost every brewery. But that's just to say that palates will change as you taste things. So, uh, not sure where I was going with that, but you know, I think that's a great thing with about small breweries too. Kristen says, yes, that's true. No one hops the beers as much as U.S. brewed IPAs. Hop head explosion in the U.S. Yeah, it's almost unfortunately for some craft brewers or even some local breweries, if they don't have an IPA on the menu, it's almost like they can't necessarily compete, which is almost too bad. So, and being a IPA fan myself, I should stop. When I go to even like local, there's been a couple of breweries that have opened up here in Rochester, Minnesota. Usually, the first thing I'll order is an IPA and kind of judge them on that. But maybe I should be a little more experimental and say, okay, I'm gonna, judge them on whatever, a porter or a stout, or if they have a saison or a
Right.
sour, maybe try that and see how it goes. Kristen says, yes, level set so we maintain variety in the industry. Yeah, I think I think there's something to be said about that. If everybody's brewing IPAs, well, it's like if everybody's brewing fizzy water lagers, then all you have to drink is fizzy water lagers, and you might as well drink one or the other. And this is just an epiphany right now of maybe that's kind of the direction with everybody brewing an IPA.
Right.
It's good to the extent that it gives the startups a pretty reliable style that they know will sell.
Sure.
Right. And see, yeah, that's where the business and the passion, there's a balance that has to be made there, because maybe a brewer doesn't like to brew IPAs. Maybe they don't like IPAs,
Right.
and who's to fault them for that? Certainly not me.
Right.
But if IPAs are what's selling, there's the business side of it. Okay, well, if IPAs are selling and a lot of people are buying IPAs, then I gotta put out a IPA. So
Right. Right.
I don't know. I don't have the answers to these questions. I'm just throwing them out there.
Well, I think if you look at the big label, I think the big label manufacturers are struggling.
Hmm.
Let's look at like Bud. You have like Bud Platinum. You have Bud Premium. They're trying to, I don't want to say deceive their consumers, but make
Hmm.
them feel like they have like a premium product. And
Right.
I'm sorry that I don't think that Bud Platinum is going to be anywhere near any of the quality of the craft beers that I drink, but to that level of consumer, to your point, they're trying to cash in on that game. Um, and I feel like my advice, for what it's worth to those people maybe trolling or watching on replay is stay in your lane. I mean, if you're making, America's best-selling lager, guess what? Keep making America's best-selling lager. Can you experiment? Can you try other things? Absolutely. But after you know after Rambo 3 and Rambo 4 and Rambo 5, like, you're like, Rambo sucks. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You didn't even care at that point. And
Right.
and that and again, that's not saying that Sylvester Stallone isn't a good actor, nor is Rambo a cool cult classic movie. Yeah, the movie was not like the next 10,000 sequels after. And I feel like if consumers see that, I feel like they're definitely being gimmickly marketed to, like, oh look, like an IPA from Budweiser. I mean, come on, dude, really, like, that's not gonna happen. People won't buy into that. I mean, look at Guinness, like, black lager and this and
Right.
that, and man, it's like, dude, not for nothing, it's like Guinness is Guinness. Like,
Right.
it's like you're. I mean, I don't think of Guinness being black lager. I think of Guinness being Guinness. I mean, yes, they're black lagers. I understand that, but I feel like often these brewers, and they try so hard to cater to so many different palates.
Right. Kristen
uh
says it's kind of offensive how the adjunct to lager brewers speak down to craft beer enthusiasts, but then try a mass marketing campaign to sell a beer to appeal to the same market.
yeah, I
And
totally agree with that.
yeah, and it kind of leaves a bad taste in your mouth. And what you kind of so there's this trend right now where these large, macro breweries, Budweiser, Coors, Miller, are buying up craft breweries. In fact, I think Heineken just bought a majority share of Lagunitas, and hopefully that doesn't affect Lagunitas, because I love a couple of different Lagunitas beers. And that's kind of going back to what we were talking about in a previous blab and earlier, of selling out. At what point is a craft beer a true craft beer? Ultimately, to me, I just take care about how a beer tastes. If it tastes good and it's a really good beer, then I enjoy it. But then on the other hand, there is a passion, and there is for lack of a better term, a craftiness to somebody putting some hours and some time and effort into crafting their beer. And when a large company comes in and they buy it, they use their marketing power and everything to distribute this beer, even though maybe it's the same people that are making it. Is it the same heart and soul and passion for that company? I don't know. I don't know. And and not to go off subject, but to me, it kind of mirrors some of the things that happen in the bike industry. Both Jonah and I, uh, both cyclists and passionate about cycling also, and have a little bit of tie-in with the cycling culture and cycling industry. You have giants like Huffy. I don't want to fault Trek. I ride Trek bikes, but Trek, Specialized. You have these giants in the industry that maybe buy up smaller companies, or use their marketing muscle, or even just their muscle with the dealers to kind of block the smaller builders. You have Graham Cycles. I would love to buy one of his bikes, and it's great that I would be able to do it direct through him. But it's a shame that he probably wouldn't be able to get into a lot of the independent bike dealers, because Trek or Specialized, or whoever the brand is, that
Right.
kind of, they don't own the shop, but they have such a vested interest in keeping that shop a giant shop, or a Specialized shop, or a Trek shop, that the whole 10%, was it, you have to increase your orders by 10% every year from the year before. How does that increase for a smaller builder to come in and say, hey, I'm Joe Graham, and I build some awesome fat bikes and road bikes. how about you just carry a frame or two of mine in your shop? Well, a shop owner is going to say, well, I can't. All my money's tied up in Trek. So it's kind of the same marketing strategy, I guess, between the craft beer industry and the bike industry. Kind of a weird crossover there, but that's kind of a similarity I see.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Well, hey, listen, I've got to wrap things up.
All right.
I got a busy day tomorrow, but thank you so much for having me on the show, Gunnar. Very
No problem.
grateful. Good episode on IPAs. Those folks just watching on replay, thank you so much. Don't forget, every Tuesday, 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, you can follow Anello or Gunnar Soros, aka Anello Grande, on Twitter, Instagram, and also be sure to subscribe to his YouTube channel as well as his blog. My name is Joan DiPasquale, aka The Hoggle. You can also find me on Twitter, YouTube, as well as Instagram and any of the other social platforms. But also, don't forget, coming up Thursdays, we also do Bike Chat 101. Very excited to announce the folks from Cycle Swami will be on our show. So tune in to find out more about what they are offering. They have a unique yoga and cycling spin studio. Gunnar, I actually thought of you when I was talking to Nick, one of the owners. And by the way, they're very excited to be on our show. And also, there are some good things coming down the pike that I can tease out a little bit. We will be doing an interview potentially with kinetic trainers, also the Hanger, as well as Sheebly. I think it's a women's clothing company that's coming out. So a lot of good things, a lot of good interviews. But as I said, Tuesdays and Thursdays, be sure same bat time, same bat channel, as they say. Gunnar, thank you so much. I'm going to sign off for the evening.
Thank you very much, and thanks, Kristen, for joining in.
Yeah, thanks, Kristen.
Love it.